The moment you are living in right now is not random. It is not luck. It is not coincidence. There are people listening to these words who feel like they have been walking through storms for years. Nights where you cried in silence, days when you felt abandoned, misunderstood, and exhausted. Moments where you asked God, why me? You saw doors close, people walk away, opportunities disappear, and battles come one after another, and you wondered if the pain would ever end. But hear this clearly today. If you are still standing, if you are still breathing, if your faith has survived everything that tried to destroy it, then this message is for you. Because there comes a moment in every chosen person's life when heaven speaks a final word over a chapter of suffering. A moment when God declares that the season of breaking has ended and the season of becoming has begun. And today the message is simple but powerful. Congratulations, it is done. You will never have to go through that again. The nights that tested your faith, the battles that tried to break your spirit, the storms that made you question your purpose, they were not meant to destroy you. They were preparing you. You were not just surviving trials, you were being refined by them. God was shaping something inside of you that the world could never take away. And the reason you feel different now is because something has shifted in the spiritual realm. The chapter of pain that once defined your life is closed. Not because you are perfect, but because you endured. Not because you were the strongest, but because you refused to quit when quitting would have been easier. That is the mark of a chosen one. The first thing every chosen person must understand is that their suffering was not punishment, it was preparation. Many people look at hardship and think it means God has abandoned them. But the Bible shows us again and again that the people God used the most were often the ones who walked through the deepest valleys first. Before Joseph ruled in the palace, he was thrown into a pit. Before David wore a crown, he faced giants and betrayal. Before Jesus rose in glory, he carried a cross. The pattern of heaven has always been the same. Preparation comes before elevation. What you thought was the worst season of your life was actually a divine training ground. Every disappointment was shaping your patience. Every betrayal was strengthening your discernment. Every closed door was redirecting you toward the door that truly belonged to you. God allowed certain battles not to break you, but to reveal the strength He had already placed within you. There were moments when you thought you were losing everything, but in reality God was removing what could not go with you into your next season. Some relationships had to end, some opportunities had to disappear, some plans had to fall apart, because the version of you that God was building could not carry the weight of things that were never meant for your future. What felt like loss was actually divine protection. What looked like rejection was actually redirection. And what seemed like endless struggle was actually the final stage of preparation before breakthrough. The chosen ones often walk the loneliest roads because God is doing a deeper work in them. When you felt isolated, when people misunderstood your journey, when even your closest circle could not understand the changes happening inside you, that was not a sign that you were abandoned. It was a sign that God was separating you for something greater. Just like gold must go through fire to remove its impurities, your spirit had to pass through seasons of pressure to reveal its true strength. The fire was never meant to destroy you. The fire was meant to purify you. And now that purification has produced something powerful: wisdom, resilience, faith, and clarity. The storms taught you lessons comfort never could. They taught you how to stand alone when necessary. They taught you how to trust God when circumstances made no sense. They taught you how to recognize your worth when others tried to diminish it. And because you survived those lessons, the next chapter of your life will not look like the previous one. The battles that once overwhelmed you will no longer have the same power. The things that used to shake your confidence will no longer control your emotions. Because the version of you that exists now is not the same person who first entered the storm. That old version of you was uncertain, wounded, and searching. But the person standing today has been forged by experience, strengthened by faith, and awakened to their purpose. And this is why the message says, you will never have to go through that again. The specific trials that shaped your character have completed their assignment. God does not repeat the same lesson once it has been learned. When the purpose of a test is fulfilled, heaven moves you forward. The pain that once defined your journey becomes the testimony that empowers someone else. The tears you cried in private become the strength you share with others who are still in the storm. And suddenly you realize something powerful. The struggle that almost broke you is the very thing that made you unbreakable. You begin to see your past differently. The betrayals were teaching you discernment. The delays were teaching you patience. The silence from God was teaching you deeper faith. None of it was wasted. Every moment was part of a divine design leading you toward the destiny that was written for your life long before you faced your first trial. So when the message says, congratulations, it is done, it is not just about relief from pain. It is about recognizing that the season of preparation has fulfilled its purpose. You have graduated from a chapter that many people never survive spiritually. You endured the darkness without losing your faith. You walked through uncertainty without abandoning your purpose. You stood in the middle of chaos and still believed that God was working behind the scenes. And because you passed that test, your life is entering a season where the lessons you learned will begin to produce visible fruit. The patience you developed will guide your decisions. The wisdom you gained will protect your future. The faith you built will open doors you once thought impossible. This is the reward of endurance. This is the moment when the chosen realized that every battle had meaning, every tear had purpose. Every setback had a hidden blessing attached to it. And now the same God who walked with you through the valley is leading you toward the mountain. Not as the same person who once struggled to survive, but as someone who has been transformed by the journey. There comes a moment in every chosen person's journey when the realization begins to settle deep within the soul that the hardest battles were never meant to last forever. The storms that once surrounded you begin to fade, and slowly you recognize that something inside you has changed. You are no longer the same person who entered those trials. The fear that once controlled your decisions is gone. The doubts that once filled your mind no longer have authority over your thoughts. The pain that once defined your days has started to transform into strength. And this is the second truth that every chosen one must understand. The end of a difficult season is not just the removal of pain. It is the beginning of divine transformation. God does not simply bring people out of suffering so they can return to who they used to be. He brings them out so they can become who they were always meant to be. When God says a chapter is finished, it means the old version of you that lived inside that struggle has also come to an end. The person who doubted their worth, the person who feared rejection, the person who believed they were not strong enough to carry their purpose, that version has been replaced by someone who has been tested and refined. Think about how powerful that transformation truly is. There were moments when you thought the pressure would break you. There were nights when you asked yourself if you would ever feel peace again. You watched situations fall apart and relationships disappear, and it felt like everything stable in your life was collapsing. But what you could not see at the time was that God was not removing stability. He was removing illusions. Some of the things you thought were permanent were never meant to stay. Some of the people you believed would always stand beside you were only part of a temporary chapter. Some of the plans you had carefully designed were not aligned with the destiny God had prepared for you. And so God allowed certain things to fall away, not because He wanted to hurt you, but because He needed to free you from attachments that would limit your future. When a chosen person enters a new season, they cannot carry the same weight they carried before. They cannot hold on to the same fears, the same insecurities, the same relationships that drained their energy and distracted them from their calling. Transformation requires release. This is why many chosen people feel alone during their growth process. It is not that they have been abandoned, it is that they are being repositioned. God sometimes removes the noise around you so that you can finally hear His voice clearly. And transformation is that it often happens so gradually that you do not fully notice it until the storm is over. While you were going through the hardest moments of your life, you may have felt weak and uncertain. But now when you look back, you can see the evidence of growth everywhere. Situations that once would have crushed your spirit no longer have the same power over you. Words that once would have shaken your confidence now pass by without leaving a mark. The opinions of people who once controlled your emotions no longer define your identity. That is transformation. That is what happens when a chosen person survives their refining season. They emerge with a clarity that cannot be easily shaken. Another part of this transformation is the development of spiritual discernment. Before your trials, you may have trusted people too easily or followed opportunities without questioning their purpose. But the experiences you walked through sharpened your awareness. Now you can sense when something is not aligned with your path. You can recognize when a door is meant to be closed, even if it looks attractive from the outside. You have learned that not every opportunity is a blessing and not every closed door is a loss. Sometimes God protects you by preventing you from entering places that would have delayed your destiny. This wisdom is one of the greatest gifts that comes from surviving a season of struggle. It becomes a compass that guides your steps moving forward. There is also a deep spiritual confidence that begins to form in people who have walked through the fire and come out stronger. This confidence is not arrogance. It is not the kind of pride that looks down on others. Instead, it is the quiet assurance that comes from knowing God carried you through situations that should have destroyed you. When you have seen God provide in moments when there was no visible solution, your faith changes forever. When you have experienced peace in the middle of chaos, you understand that your strength does not come from circumstances. It comes from the presence of God working within you. That realization becomes unshakable. It allows you to walk into future challenges without the same fear you once had. Because now you know something that many people never learns. If God carried you through your darkest season, He will not abandon you in the next one. This transformation also changes how you see your purpose. Before your trials, you may have believed your purpose was connected to achievements, recognition, or external success. But suffering has a way of revealing deeper truths about life. It teaches you that purpose is not simply about reaching a destination. It is about becoming someone who can bring light into the lives of others. The pain you experienced has given you empathy for people who are still struggling. The lessons you learned have equipped you with wisdom that can guide someone else through their darkest moments. The strength you developed has become a source of encouragement for those who feel weak. In this way, your suffering has been transformed into a tool for impact. The very experiences that once felt like burdens are now part of the testimony that will inspire others. This is why the message, "You will never have to go through that again," carries such profound meaning. It is not just saying that the specific hardship has ended. It is declaring that the version of you that needed that hardship for growth no longer exists. The lesson has been learned. The strength has been built. The transformation has taken place. God does not keep His children trapped in the same classroom once they have passed the test. He moves them forward into the next level of their journey. And the next level always looks different because the person stepping into it is different. Now you begin to walk through life with a deeper awareness of God's guidance. You begin to trust the process even when you cannot see the entire path ahead. You understand that delays are not always denials, and that closed doors often redirect you towards something better. Instead of panicking when challenges appear, you pause and remember how many times God has already made a way for you. That memory becomes fuel for your faith. It reminds you that your story is still unfolding and that the same power that carried you through the valley will also lead you toward the mountain. And this is the remarkable truth about transformation. Once it happens, it cannot be undone. The strength you gained cannot be taken away. The wisdom you learned cannot be erased. The faith you developed cannot be easily shaken. You have crossed a spiritual threshold that permanently changes how you approach life. The storms you survived have become proof that you are capable of far more than you once believed. So when heaven says, "Congratulations, it is done," it is not simply acknowledging the end of a painful chapter. It is celebrating the birth of a stronger, wiser, and more spiritually awakened version of you. The trials that once felt endless have completed their assignment. And standing on the other side of them is someone who now understands that they were never just surviving the storm. They were being transformed by it. The final truth that every chosen one must understand is that when God ends a season of suffering, He is not just closing a chapter of pain, He is opening a season of purpose, authority, and impact that you were always meant to walk in. The storms you survived were not only shaping your character, they were positioning you for something greater than you imagined. There are moments in life when God allows you to walk through darkness so that when you finally step into the light, you carry a wisdom that cannot be taught any other way. Many people want the blessing, the influence, the favor, and the breakthrough, but very few are willing to endure the process required to handle those things with maturity. That is why the chosen often walk through seasons that others do not understand. The training is different because the assignment is different. When God calls someone for a greater purpose, He prepares them in ways that often look like hardship from the outside. The world may see struggle, delay, and loss, but heaven sees development. Every challenge was building something necessary inside of you. The patience you learned was preparing you to lead without rushing decisions. The humility you developed was protecting you from pride when success eventually arrived. The resilience you built was ensuring that future obstacles would not be able to stop your progress. God does not place people into significant purpose without first preparing their spirit to carry the weight of that calling. Without that preparation, the blessing itself could become a burden. This is why the end of a difficult season often comes with a deep realization. You are no longer chasing validation from the world. When you were going through your hardest moments, You may have hoped that one day people would finally understand your struggle, acknowledge your strength, or recognize your worth. But somewhere along the journey, something changed inside you. You stopped seeking approval from people who never truly understood your path. You stopped trying to prove yourself to those who doubted you. Instead, you began focusing on something far more powerful, walking in alignment with God's purpose for your life. That shift in perspective is one of the clearest signs that transformation has taken place. Because when a chosen person reaches this stage, their motivation changes. They are no longer driven by ego, comparison, or the need to impress others. They are driven by purpose. Purpose is different from ambition. Ambition is about personal gain, but purpose is about impact. Ambition asks, how far can I go? But purpose asks, how many people can I help along the way? The storms you endured have given you the ability to understand pain in a way that others cannot. You know what it feels like to be uncertain about the future. You know what it feels like to stand alone when support disappears. You know what it feels like to pray for answers while everything around you seems to be falling apart. Because you have lived through those experiences, you now carry a level of empathy that allows you to speak hope into the lives of others. When you encourage someone who is struggling, your words carry weight because they come from experience, not theory. This is one of the hidden purposes behind your trials. God was not only preparing you for personal growth, He was preparing you to become a source of strength for others. The pain that once felt isolating will eventually become the bridge that connects you to people who need encouragement. When someone hears your story and realizes that you survived the same kind of struggle they are currently facing, it gives them hope that they can survive it too. Your testimony becomes evidence that darkness does not have the final word. Your resilience becomes proof that faith can survive even the hardest storms. Another powerful shift that happens at this stage of the journey is the development of spiritual authority. This does not mean controlling others or acting superior. It means walking with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing who you are and whose you are. Before your trials, you may have questioned your value or doubted your ability to make a difference. But after everything you have walked through, those doubts begin to fade. You realize that if God trusted you enough to carry you through those difficult seasons, He must also trust you with the next level of your calling. That realization builds a deep inner strength. Spiritual authority also means you begin to recognize the difference between distractions and destiny. Many people spend years chasing things that look impressive, but ultimately lead them away from their true purpose. But when you have been through a refining season, your priorities become clearer. You stop wasting energy on situations that do not align with your calling. You stop giving your time to people who drain your spirit. You become more intentional about where you invest your attention and effort. This focus is not selfish, it is necessary. A chosen person cannot fulfill their purpose if they are constantly pulled in directions that do not belong to their path. At the same time, this season often brings opportunities that once seemed impossible. Doors begin to open that you could not open on your own. Connections appear that guide you toward new possibilities. Ideas and visions begin to form that excite your spirit. These moments can feel surprising, especially after a long period of struggle, but they are part of the natural progression of your journey. When the preparation season ends, the manifestation season begins. The seeds that were planted during your years of endurance start to produce visible fruit. However, it is important to understand that stepping into purpose does not mean life will suddenly become free of challenges. What changes is how you respond to them. The storms that once made you feel powerless will now appear as obstacles that can be navigated with wisdom and faith. The difference is that you now carry experience. You know what it feels like to overcome adversity. You have already proven to yourself that you can survive difficult seasons. That memory becomes a source of strength whenever new challenges appear. Instead of panicking, you remember how many times God has already brought you through situations that looked impossible. One of the most beautiful parts of this stage is the sense of peace that begins to settle into your life. After years of uncertainty and struggle, you start to feel a quiet assurance that you are exactly where you are meant to be. You no longer feel the same pressure to control every outcome or force every opportunity. You trust that God is guiding your steps, even when the path ahead is not completely clear. This peace is not dependent on circumstances. It comes from knowing that your life is being directed by something greater than your own plans. And as you move forward, you begin to see how every part of your journey fits together. The painful moments that once seemed meaningless now reveal their purpose. The delays that once frustrated you now make sense because they protected you from moving too early. The closed doors that once disappointed you now appear as divine redirections that kept you aligned with the right path. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, you realize that God was working behind the scenes the entire time. That realization fills you with gratitude. Instead of focusing on what you lost, you begin appreciating what you gained through the process. Strength replaced fear, wisdom replaced confusion, faith replaced doubt. The person you have become is far more capable and resilient than the person you were before the storm began. And that transformation is the true victory. So when the message says, "Congratulations, it is done," it is announcing that the preparation season has fulfilled its purpose and the next chapter of your life is ready to begin. You are stepping into a phase where your experiences, your faith, and your growth will begin to influence the world around you in ways you never expected. The struggles you survived have positioned you to walk in a calling that requires strength, compassion, and unwavering faith. And now you carry all three. The storms are behind you, but the purpose ahead of you is just beginning. The same journey that once tested your spirit will now become the foundation for the impact you are meant to make. The truth is that every chosen person eventually reaches a moment where they look back at the path they walked and realize that nothing was wasted. Every tear had meaning. Every delay had protection hidden within it. Every battle had a lesson waiting to be discovered. What once felt like the hardest season of your life becomes the story that proves God's faithfulness. And as you move forward into this new chapter, you carry the confidence of someone who knows that if God brought you through everything you faced before, He will continue guiding you through whatever lies ahead. The chapter of suffering has closed, the lessons have been learned, and the person who emerged from the storm is stronger than ever before. Congratulations, it is done. You will never have to go through that again, because the journey that once tested you has already transformed you into exactly who you needed to become.